The dust on Clara Bennett's traveling dress had turned from brown to rust red by the time she stepped off the stagecoach in Tombstone, Arizona Territory, on a scorching afternoon in June of 1882. And she knew without looking that every eye in the street had turned to assess the stranger with the peculiar way of holding her shawl tight across her middle, despite the heat. She was 22 years old, alone, and 4 months pregnant with a child, whose father had left her standing at the altar in St. Louis before disappearing into the night with her savings and whatever remained of her foolish heart. The town sprawled before her like something out of a fever dream, all wooden storefronts and dirt streets baking under an unforgiving sun. Clara clutched her single carpetbag and made her way toward the boarding house that her cousin's letter had mentioned, keeping her eyes down and her oversized shawl positioned just so. She had learned in the weeks since leaving Missouri that loose clothing could hide many secrets, but it could not hide the fear that lived in her chest like a stone. The Silver Bell boarding house stood at the end of Allen Street, a 2-story structure that had seen better days but looked clean enough. Clara was reaching for the door when she heard the unmistakable sound of spurs behind her and a voice that was surprisingly gentle for such a rough town. "Let me get that for you, miss." She turned to find herself looking at a man who stood well over 6 feet tall, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of strong coffee. He wore the typical garb of a working cowboy, dusty from the trail, but there was something in his face that made her pause. Kindness, perhaps, or maybe just the bone-deep weariness of someone who had seen too much of the world's harsh edges. "Thank you," Clara managed, stepping through the door he held open. "Name's Jack Morrison," he said, following her inside. "I work at the boarding house, help with repairs and such." "You must be Mrs. Fletcher's cousin from back east." Clara felt her throat tighten. "Miss Bennett, actually, Clara Bennett." Something shifted in Jack's expression, but he only nodded. "Well, Miss Bennett, welcome to Tombstone. I hope you'll find it suits you." He tipped his hat and headed toward the back of the house, leaving Clara standing in the small entryway with her heart beating too fast, and the uncomfortable sensation that those dark eyes had seen far more than she wanted them to. Her cousin Margaret appeared from the kitchen, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. She was a sturdy woman of 40 with graying hair and a no-nonsense manner that had always made Clara feel safe as a child. That feeling flooded back now as Margaret pulled her into an embrace. "Lord, child, you look half dead from that journey. Come on, let me get you settled." The room Margaret showed her to was small but clean, with a window that overlooked the street and a bed that looked like heaven after weeks of traveling. Clara sank onto it gratefully, finally allowing herself to release the tension she had been carrying since St. Louis. "I suppose you want to know everything," Clara said quietly. Margaret sat beside her, taking her hand. "I know enough from your letter. Man promised to marry you, got what he wanted, then ran. Tale as old as time, honey, and nothing for you to be ashamed of. The town won't see it that way. The town doesn't need to know anything you don't want to tell them. You wear loose dresses, keep to yourself until the baby comes, then we'll figure out the rest." Margaret squeezed her hand. "You're not the first woman to find herself in this situation, and you won't be the last. We'll manage." Over the following weeks, Clara settled into a routine at the boarding house. She helped Margaret with cooking and cleaning, though her cousin insisted she take frequent rests. The heat was oppressive, and Clara found herself constantly adjusting her clothing, layering loose blouses over even looser skirts, wrapping shawls around her shoulders despite the temperature. She saw Jack Morrison often. He was always fixing something, mending a fence or repairing stairs, and he had a habit of appearing whenever she was struggling with a heavy pot or reaching for something on a high shelf. He never said much, just offered his help with that same quiet courtesy, then disappeared before she could fully thank him. It was on a particularly hot morning in late July when everything changed. Clara had risen early to help Margaret prepare breakfast for the boarders, and she was carrying a basket of eggs from the henhouse when she stumbled on an uneven board in the walkway. The basket flew from her hands as she tried to catch herself, and she would have fallen hard if not for the strong arms that caught her from behind. "Easy now." Jack's voice was close to her ear as he steadied her. "You all right?" Clara nodded, breathless, but when she tried to step away, her shawl caught on something and pulled loose. For just a moment, the morning light revealed what she had been so carefully hiding: the unmistakable curve of her belly beneath the thin fabric of her dress. She froze, waiting for the judgment, the disgust, the cold withdrawal that was sure to come. But Jack simply bent to retrieve her shawl and draped it gently back around her shoulders, his hands lingering for just a moment. "How far along?" he asked quietly. Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. "Nearly 5 months." Jack was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. Then he said something that made her heart stop entirely. "I will be the father." She stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What?" "I will be the father," he repeated, his voice steady and sure. "If you will let me. We can tell people we met before you came here that we have been planning this all along. I will marry you proper, give the baby my name, and no one in this town will dare speak ill of you or the child." "But why?" Clara whispered. "You do not even know me." Something painful crossed Jack's face then, a shadow of old grief. "I had a wife once, Sarah. She died bringing our son into the world, and he died 2 days after. That was 3 years ago, back in Texas." He met her eyes directly. "I know what it is to lose everything, Miss Bennett. And I know what it is to wish someone had been there to help when help was needed. So I am offering now if you will have me." Clara found she could not speak past the lump in her throat. This man, this stranger, was offering her everything she had lost. Respectability, protection, a name for her child. It was more than she had dared to hope for. "I have nothing to offer you in return," she finally managed. "No dowry, no prospects, just a child that is not yours and a reputation already ruined." "I am not asking for anything in return," Jack said simply. "Except maybe a chance to do right by someone, to build something good out of all this dust and difficulty." The tears spilled over then, and Clara found herself nodding even as she wept. Yes, all right, thank you." Jack pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to her, that small gesture of kindness nearly undoing her completely. "We should tell your cousin first, then figure out the rest." Margaret was surprisingly unsurprised by the announcement. She looked at Jack with something like approval in her eyes as she listened to his plan, then turned to Clara. "You are sure about this, honey? Marriage is not something to enter into lightly, even under these circumstances." "I am sure," Clara said, and realized she meant it. There was something solid about Jack Morrison, something steady that made her feel safer than she had in months. They were married 3 days later by the town justice, with Margaret and the local shopkeeper as witnesses. It was nothing like the elaborate wedding Clara had once imagined, but as Jack slipped a simple gold band onto her finger and spoke the vows in his low, steady voice, she felt something crack open in her chest. Not love, not yet, but perhaps the possibility of it. Jack moved his few belongings into Clara's small room that evening, though he insisted on sleeping on the floor despite her protests. "I meant what I said about doing right by you," he told her as he laid out his bedroll. "But I will not presume on you, Clara. We will take this slow, build trust first. The rest can come later if it comes at all." As Clara lay in the narrow bed that night, listening to Jack's steady breathing from the floor, she found herself studying what she knew of this man who was now her husband. He rose before dawn each morning to tend the horses. He never raised his voice, even when the work was frustrating. He had a way with animals that spoke of patience and gentleness, and he had offered her salvation without asking for anything in return. The days that followed fell into a new pattern. Jack continued his work around the boarding house, but now he made a point of taking meals with Clara, asking about her day, telling her small stories about the ranch where he had grown up in Texas. Clara, for her part, found herself watching him when he did not notice, curious about this quiet man who had upended her life so completely. It was during one of these meals, about 2 weeks after their wedding, that Clara finally asked the question that had been haunting her. "Why did you stay in Tombstone? After your wife and son died, I mean, why not go back to Texas?" Jack was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "Nothing left for me there. My parents were gone, the ranch sold off. I figured I would drift for a while, and Tombstone seemed as good a place as any to land." He looked up at her. "Maybe I was waiting for a reason to stay put." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning Clara was not quite ready to examine. Instead, she said, "Tell me about her, Sarah." Jack's face softened. "She was a rancher's daughter, tough as nails and twice as sharp. We grew up together, married young. She wanted a house full of children." His voice caught slightly. "The pregnancy was difficult from the start, but the doctor said she would be fine. He was wrong." Clara reached across the table and took his hand, the first time she had initiated such contact. "I am so sorry, Jack." He squeezed her fingers gently. "It was a long time ago, and while I will always carry that grief, I have learned that carrying it does not mean I cannot also carry hope." His dark eyes met hers. "You and this baby, you are giving me that. A chance to be part of something good again." Something shifted between them in that moment, some invisible wall beginning to crumble. Clara found herself leaving her hand in his for longer than strictly necessary, and when she finally pulled away, she could still feel the warmth of his touch. As summer deepened into the furnace heat of August, Clara's pregnancy became harder to hide despite the loose clothing. The other boarders, who had been told the carefully crafted story of a mail-order marriage arranged before Clara's arrival, offered their congratulations with varying degrees of sincerity. Clara learned to smile and accept their well wishes, all while marveling at how naturally Jack played the part of expectant father. He was attentive without being overbearing, bringing her water when the heat grew too intense, insisting she rest during the hottest part of the day. He started building a cradle in the small workshop behind the boarding house, working on it in the evenings by lamplight. Clara would sometimes watch from the window, studying the care he took with each piece of wood, the concentration on his face. One evening in late August, Clara went out to the workshop and stood in the doorway, watching Jack sand the cradle's curved rockers with steady, practiced movements. "It is beautiful," she said softly. Jack looked up, surprise and pleasure crossing his face. "You think so?" "I have been trying to remember how my father made mine, but it has been a long time." Clara stepped closer, running her hand along the smooth wood. "The baby will love it. Boy or girl, do you think?" Jack asked, resuming his work. "I do not know. Does it matter to you?" He shook his head. "Healthy is all that matters. Healthy baby, healthy mother." Something fierce entered his voice. "I will not lose anyone else, Clara, I swear it." The intensity of his words made her look at him sharply. "Jack, you cannot control such things. Childbirth is dangerous, we both know that." "Then we will get the best doctor, take every precaution. Margaret says there is a woman 2 towns over, a midwife who has never lost a mother. I can ride out tomorrow, arrange for her to come when your time gets close." Clara felt something warm bloom in her chest, a feeling she had been trying not to name. "You would do that, Clara." Jack set down his sandpaper and turned to face her fully. "I made a promise to you and to this child. I intend to keep it no matter what it takes." She moved closer, drawn by something she could not quite define. "It is more than a promise now, is it not? For you, I mean." Jack held very still, as if afraid any movement might spook her. "What are you asking me?" "I am asking if you care." "Truly care, not just out of duty or guilt or trying to make up for what you lost." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the town settling in for the night. Then Jack reached up and gently touched her face, his calloused fingers surprisingly tender. "I care," he said quietly. "More than I thought I would, more than I maybe should after such a short time. You are brave and strong and kinder than anyone I have known. And yes, Clara, I care what happens to you and to this baby. Very much." Clara felt her breath catch. She had not expected this, had not allowed herself to hope for it. But standing here in the warm lamplight with Jack's hand gentle against her cheek, She realized that somewhere along the way, her feelings had shifted too. This was not the wild, reckless passion she had felt for the man who had betrayed her. This was something quieter but infinitely stronger, built on shared meals and quiet conversations and 1,000 small kindnesses. "I care too," she whispered. "I did not think I could, not after everything. But I do." Jack's smile was like sunrise, slow and warm and full of light. He leaned forward carefully, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and pressed his lips to her forehead. It was chaste, almost brotherly, but it sent warmth flooding through Clara's entire body. "We will make this work," Jack said against her skin. "All of us together, I promise you that." That night, Jack finally accepted Clara's invitation to share the bed rather than sleeping on the floor. They lay side by side in the darkness, not touching but aware of each other in every breath. Clara found herself studying his profile in the moonlight that filtered through the window. "Jack," she said softly, thank you for everything, for seeing me when I thought I was invisible, for offering me a life when I thought mine was over." He rolled onto his side to face her, his expression serious. "You were never invisible, Clara. From the moment I saw you, dusty and scared and trying so hard to be brave, I saw you. And I promise I will keep seeing you every day for as long as you will let me." Clara felt tears slip down her temples. "I was so afraid. I thought I would have to do this alone, that I would be judged and cast out, and my baby would grow up knowing they were unwanted." "Your baby is wanted," Jack said firmly. "By you, and now by me too. I know I am not the father by blood, but I will be the father in every way that counts. I will teach them to ride and rope, to read and write, to stand up for what is right. I will love them as my own because they are my own, Clara. The moment I made you that promise, they became mine." The tears were flowing freely now, but they were good tears, healing tears. Clara reached out in the darkness and found Jack's hand, twining her fingers with his. "I think I am falling in love with you," she said, the words escaping before she could stop them. Jack's hand tightened on hers. "Good," he said simply, "because I am already halfway there myself." September brought slightly cooler temperatures and the reality that Clara's time was drawing near. Jack made good on his promise and brought the midwife, a capable woman named Ruth who had been delivering babies for 30 years. She examined Clara and pronounced everything progressing well, then agreed to return in early October when the baby was due. As Clara's belly grew impossibly larger, Jack's attentiveness grew with it. He helped her with tasks that had become difficult, never making her feel weak or incapable. He read to her in the evenings from newspapers and dime novels, making her laugh with his dramatic renditions of the more ridiculous stories. And at night, they lay together in the narrow bed, talking about everything and nothing, building the foundation of something real and lasting. It was during one of these late-night conversations that Clara finally told him about the man who had left her. "His name was Richard," she said quietly. "He was charming and handsome, and he told me everything I wanted to hear. That I was beautiful, that he loved me, that we would have a wonderful life together. I believed him because I wanted to, because I was lonely and foolish and desperate for someone to choose me." Jack listened without interrupting, his thumb tracing slow circles on the back of her hand. "When I told him about the baby, he seemed happy at first. We planned the wedding, sent out invitations, bought my dress. And then, the night before we were supposed to marry, he came to my room and asked if I had my inheritance yet. My parents had left me a small sum, you see, held in trust until I married." Clara's voice hardened. "When I said yes and showed him the bank draft, he took it and left, just like that. I waited at the church the next morning like a fool, and he never came." "He is the fool," Jack said fiercely. "And a coward and a thief besides. You deserved better than that, Clara." "I deserved what I got for being so naive," Clara said bitterly. "No," Jack's voice was firm. "You deserved to be loved honestly and treated with respect. You deserved to have your trust honored, not exploited. What happened to you was not your fault." Clara found herself crying again, but Jack pulled her carefully into his arms, mindful of her belly, and held her while she wept. When the tears finally subsided, she felt lighter somehow, as if sharing the story had released some of its power over her. "I am going to love you properly," Jack said into her hair. "The way you should have been loved all along, and if I ever see this Richard character, I will have some very pointed words for him about how to treat a lady." Despite the heaviness of the conversation, Clara found herself smiling. "Just words? Well, maybe a fist or two as well, depending on his attitude." Clara laughed, the sound surprising her. "My hero." "Always," Jack said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. The first pains came on a cool morning in early October, just as Ruth had predicted. Clara was helping Margaret with breakfast when she felt the first tightening across her belly. By midday, the pains were coming regularly, and Jack rode like fury to fetch Ruth while Margaret prepared the bedroom. The labor was long and difficult. Clara had known it would be, had heard enough stories from other women to understand what lay ahead, but nothing quite prepared her for the reality. Through it all, Jack stayed by her side, letting her squeeze his hand until she was sure she would break bones, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement even when she was certain she could not go on. "You can do this," he told her as dawn broke on the second day of labor. "You are the strongest person I know, Clara, just a little longer." "I cannot," she gasped, exhausted beyond measure. "You can, look at me." Jack's dark eyes locked with hers. "I am right here and I am not going anywhere. We are doing this together, remember, you and me and this baby. Come on now, love. Bring our child into the world." Whether it was his words or simply the progression of nature, Clara found some hidden reserve of strength. With Ruth's guidance and Jack's hand gripping hers, she pushed through the final, excruciating contractions. And then, impossibly, there was a cry, thin and reedy but undeniably alive. "A boy," Ruth announced, wrapping the baby in a clean cloth. "A healthy baby boy." Clara was crying and laughing at the same time as Ruth placed the tiny, squalling bundle in her arms. He was perfect, red-faced and angry at being thrust into the world with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that flailed at the air. "Hello, little one," Clara whispered, awed. "Hello, my sweet boy." She looked up to find Jack staring at the baby with an expression of such wonder and tenderness that it made her heart ache. "Jack, meet your son," his eyes snapped to hers. "Clara, I cannot just—" "Yes, you can." Clara shifted the baby carefully. "Hold him. He is yours, Jack. In all the ways that matter, he is yours." Jack reached out with trembling hands and took the baby with surprising competence, cradling him against his chest. The baby's crying subsided almost immediately, as if he recognized safety when he felt it. "Hey there, little man," Jack said softly. "Welcome to the world. Your mama and I have been waiting for you." Watching them together, Clara felt something click into place deep in her soul. This was her family. Not the one she had imagined or planned for, but the one she had been given, and it was perfect. "What should we name him?" she asked. Jack looked up from the baby, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I was thinking Samuel after my father, but only if you approve." "Samuel Morrison," Clara tested the name. "It is perfect." They spent the next few weeks in a haze of sleepless nights and the peculiar joy that only a new baby can bring. Samuel was a good baby, quick to smile and generally content, and Jack took to fatherhood as if he had been born for it. He walked the floor with the baby when he fussed, changed diapers without complaint, and sang old cowboy songs in his rough baritone until Samuel drifted off to sleep. Clara watched them together and felt her heart grow fuller each day. The love she had been halfway to admitting in September had blossomed into something complete and consuming. She loved Jack Morrison with a depth that surprised her, not despite the circumstances of their marriage, but perhaps because of them. He had chosen her when he did not have to, had loved her baby before he was even born, had proven through 1,000 small actions that he was a man of his word. It was on a cool evening in late October, with Samuel asleep in his beautiful cradle and the desert stars bright overhead, that Clara finally found the courage to say it. They were sitting on the porch of the boarding house, Clara in the rocking chair and Jack on the steps, both of them savoring the quiet after a busy day. "Jack," Clara said softly, I love you." The words hung in the air between them, simple and true. Jack turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the shadows. "You do not have to say that," he said carefully. "I know this arrangement was not exactly conventional and I do not want you to feel obligated to—" "I am not saying it because I feel obligated," Clara interrupted. "I am saying it because it is true. I love you, Jack Morrison. I love your kindness and your strength and the way you sing off-key to our son. I love how you have never once made me feel ashamed or less than. I love that you saw me when I thought I was invisible and offered me hope when I had none. I love you completely and I needed you to know that." Jack was on his feet in an instant, crossing to kneel beside her chair. He took both her hands in his face illuminated by the lamplight spilling from the window. "Clara Bennett Morrison," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have loved you since the day you stumbled over that board, and I saw that you were trying to carry the whole world on your shoulders all alone. I love your courage and your heart and the way you love our son. I love that you gave me a second chance at a family when I thought that door was closed forever. I love you with everything I have, and I will spend the rest of my life proving it to you." Clara reached out and cupped his face in her hands, drawing him closer. "Kiss me," she whispered. "Really kiss me, not like a brother or a friend. Kiss me like a husband who loves his wife." Jack did not need to be asked twice. He leaned in and captured her lips with his, and it was everything their relationship had been building toward. Sweet and passionate and full of promise, a kiss that spoke of new beginnings and hard-won happiness. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to love you until my last breath," he promised. "You and Samuel and any other children we might have. This family we are building, it is everything to me." "To me too," Clara said, tears of joy streaming down her face. "To me too." That night, they made their marriage a true one in every sense, coming together with tenderness and passion and a love that had been tested and proven strong. Afterward, lying in the tangled sheets with Jack's arms around her and Samuel sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Clara reflected on the strange and winding path that had brought her here. She had come to Tombstone broken and alone, convinced her life was over. But instead, she had found Jack, had built something real and lasting out of desperation and dust. The man she had thought would be her husband had proven to be a villain, but the stranger who had offered to take his place had become her greatest love. The years that followed were not always easy. Tombstone was a hard town in a harder territory, and there were lean times and difficulties aplenty. But through it all, Jack and Clara stood together, their love deepening with each passing season. Samuel grew into a bright, energetic boy who worshipped his father and showed early signs of Jack's steady temperament. When he was 2 years old, Clara became pregnant again, and this time there was no fear, only joy. Jack was beside himself with excitement, already planning additions to the house he had begun building on a piece of land just outside town. Their daughter Rose was born on a spring morning in 1885, coming into the world with far less drama than her brother had. She had Clara's fair coloring and Jack's dark eyes, and both her parents doted on her shamelessly. As Jack held his daughter for the first time, with Samuel perched on the bed beside Clara demanding to see his new sister, Clara felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it nearly knocked her breathless. This was her life now, not the one she had planned, but something infinitely better. "What are you thinking?" Jack asked, catching her expression. "I am thinking about how blessed I am," Clara said honestly, "how a moment of kindness from a stranger became everything. How you saw me when I was trying to be invisible and said I will be the father. How those words changed the course of my entire life." Jack shifted Rose carefully to one arm and reached out to take Clara's hand with the other. "I am the blessed one. You gave me back my purpose, my heart, my future. You and these children, you are everything I could have asked for and more." Samuel, who had been examining his sister with great interest, piped up. "Papa, when I grow up, I want to be just like you." Jack's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "Then you will be a fine man indeed, son." They moved into their new house that summer, a modest but comfortable place with enough land for a small herd of cattle and a vegetable garden. Jack continued working with horses, his reputation for patience and skill spreading throughout the territory. Clara kept busy with the children and the house, and in her spare time, she began writing letters for townspeople who could not read or write, charging a small fee that helped supplement Jack's income. Life settled into a rhythm that was both peaceful and fulfilling. Samuel started school and proved to be a natural scholar, devouring books as fast as his parents could provide them. Rose grew from a placid baby into a mischievous toddler who kept everyone on their toes. And through it all, Jack and Clara's love continued to grow, deepening from passion into the kind of partnership that could weather any storm. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Jack surprised Clara with a gift. It was a locket, simple but beautiful, with 2 tiny photographs inside, one of Samuel, one of Rose. "I wanted you to have something to remind you of what we have built," Jack said as he fastened it around her neck. "Our family, our life together, everything that matters." Clara touched the locket, then reached up to kiss him. "I do not need reminders, but I will treasure this always, just as I treasure you." That evening, after the children were asleep, they sat on the porch of their home and watched the stars emerge over the desert. The air was cooling after another scorching day, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. "Do you ever think about him?" Jack asked quietly. "Richard, I mean, do you wonder what became of him?" Clara considered the question. "Sometimes, briefly, but not with any real feeling. He was part of another life, another version of me that does not exist anymore. What we have, Jack, it is so much better than anything I could have had with him. He gave me Samuel, and for that I will always be grateful, but you gave me everything else. A home, a family, a love I never dreamed possible." Jack pulled her closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "I used to think my life ended when Sarah and the baby died, that I would just exist until my time came, going through the motions but never really living again. And then you stumbled off that stagecoach, all fierce and scared and determined, and suddenly I had a reason to wake up in the morning." "We saved each other," Clara said softly. "Yes," Jack agreed. "We did." In 1887, their 3rd child arrived, another boy they named James. He was followed 2 years later by a daughter, Elizabeth. The house rang with noise and laughter, with the organized chaos that came from raising 4 children in the still wild Arizona territory. Samuel grew into a fine young man who did indeed take after his father, steady and kind with a deep love for the land. Rose became a teacher, much to her parents' pride. James showed an early aptitude for working with horses that delighted Jack, while Elizabeth proved to be the family artist, always drawing or painting something. Through it all, Jack never once treated Samuel any differently than the children he had fathered himself. To anyone who asked, he had 4 children, period. The story of Clara's first pregnancy and hasty marriage had long since faded into obscurity, just another tale in a town full of them. The Morrison family was known instead for their kindness, their hard work, and the obvious love that bound them together. As the century drew toward a close, Tombstone began to change. The wild days of gunfights and silver strikes gave way to something more civilized, more settled. The territory became a state. The children grew up and started lives of their own. Samuel married a rancher's daughter and gave Clara and Jack their first grandchild, a boy they named Jack in honor of his grandfather. Rose married a fellow teacher and moved to Phoenix. James took over the family horse business, expanding it beyond what Jack had ever imagined. And Elizabeth, their dreamer, moved to San Francisco to study art, returning home often with paintings of the desert she loved. Through all these changes, Jack and Clara remained constants in each other's lives. Their hair turned gray, their faces lined with the marks of time and sun, but their love never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, tempered by shared joys and sorrows, by the life they had built together from nothing but hope and determination. On a warm evening in 1910, 28 years after they had first met, Clara and Jack sat on the porch of their home and watched the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. They were grandparents several times over now, their children grown and scattered but still close, still the family they had fought so hard to create. "You remember the day we met?" Clara asked, her hand in Jack's as it had been countless times over the years. "Every detail," Jack said. "You with your carpetbag and your determination, trying so hard to hide what you thought was shame. I knew right then that you were special, that you were worth fighting for. You said I will be the father," Clara remembered. Just like that, no hesitation. "You changed my entire life with those words." Jack lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "And you changed mine by saying yes, by trusting me when you had every reason not to, by loving me when I did not think I could be loved again." Clara leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence, the steady beat of his heart. "We had a good life, did we not?" "The best," Jack agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible. 4 beautiful children, a home full of love, and you beside me every step of the way." "What more could any man ask for?" "More years," Clara said softly. "Always more years together." Jack squeezed her hand. "Then we will take everyone we are given and make the most of them, just like we have been doing all along," and they did. For many more years, Jack and Clara Morrison lived in their home on the edge of what had once been the wild frontier, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, secure in the love they had fought for and won. Their story became family legend, passed down through generations. The tale of a frightened young woman who had come to Tombstone with nothing but secrets, and the cowboy who had seen past the disguise to the person beneath, who had offered his name and his heart and built a love that lasted a lifetime. On quiet evenings, their great-grandchildren would ask to hear the story again, how great-grandmother Clara had hidden her pregnancy under loose clothes, and how great-grandfather Jack had seen anyway and said, "I will be the father." They would listen wide-eyed as Clara described that first meeting, the fear and hope tangled together, the moment when a stranger's kindness had changed everything. And Clara would look at Jack, still beside her after all these years, and see in his dark eyes the same love and commitment he had offered that day in 1882. The same steady presence that had seen her through childbirth and child-rearing, through hard times and good times, through everything that life in the American West could throw at them. Their love story had not begun with passion or romance. It had begun with compassion and choice, with one person seeing another's need and stepping forward to help. But from those humble beginnings, it had grown into something magnificent, something lasting, something that proved that the truest love stories were not always the ones that started with hearts and flowers. Sometimes they started with dust and desperation, and a cowboy who looked at a frightened young woman and saw not her shame but her strength. Sometimes they started with 5 simple words that contained a world of promise: "I will be the father." And sometimes, if you were very lucky, they lasted a lifetime. Clara Morrison passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1925 at the age of 65, surrounded by her family. Jack followed her 6 months later, unable to imagine a world without his beloved wife in it. They were buried side by side in the Tombstone cemetery, under a simple stone that read, "Together in life, together in eternity." Their children ensured that their story lived on, that future generations would know how their family had begun. Samuel, who carried Jack's name if not his blood but always his heart, made sure his own children understood the power of choosing love, of stepping forward when someone needed help, of seeing past circumstances to the person beneath. The old boarding house where they had met was eventually torn down, replaced by more modern buildings. The wild days of Tombstone faded into history. But in the family that Jack and Clara had created, in the descendants who spread across Arizona and beyond, their legacy lived on. It lived on in the value they had placed on family and commitment, in the lesson that love was not just a feeling but a choice, made every day through actions large and small. In the understanding that sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places, and that courage meant not just facing danger but facing fear and choosing hope anyway. And it lived on in the story itself, told and retold until it became something almost mythic. The tale of she was hiding a pregnancy under loose clothes. The cowboy saw anyway and said, "I will be the father." A story of compassion and second chances, of love found in the unlikeliest of circumstances, of two broken people who came together and made each other whole. In the end, it was not a story about scandal or shame. It was a story about redemption and grace, about looking beyond surface circumstances to see the human being in need. It was about Jack Morrison, who had every reason to close his heart after tragedy but chose instead to open it. And it was about Clara Bennett, who had every reason to give up on love but found the courage to trust again. Together, they had built something beautiful out of dust and difficulty. They had created a family, a home, a life worth living. They had proven that the truest love stories were not the ones without obstacles, but the ones where people chose each other anyway, day after day, year after year. And in the warm Arizona nights, when their descendants gathered to share stories of the family's past, the tale of Jack and Clara always stood out as the foundation of it all. The moment when kindness met need, when courage met compassion, when two hearts that had been broken found healing in each other. The moment when a cowboy looked at a woman trying to hide her pregnancy under loose clothes, saw past the disguise to the fear and hope beneath, and made a choice that would echo through generations. The moment when he said, "Simply and surely I will be the father." And in doing so became not just a father, but a husband, a partner, a love story for the ages.